Hello there, folks. This is Uncle Troy, and this is another C word update. For those who aren't keeping track, I was diagnosed with colon cancer, and I've been making a separate video log from all the rest of my channel just to keep people up to date. Since last we spoke, I've been in the hospital. I spent over a week in the hospital for things which were not exactly 100% related to the cancer. I don't think. It's kind of confusing. I'm still a little fuzzy on what all happened, but basically what happened was several weeks ago, in between runs of chemotherapy, I developed some symptoms, a pain in my butt, for lack of a better descriptive term. And there are parts of your butt that are just there to look good, and there are parts of there just to cushion you when you sit. And there's parts that are kind of structurally important to where you sit. Parts that if those parts aren't working, you can't sit. And I developed a sore on one of those parts where a lot of your weight is balanced when you're sitting. And we tried various things. We tried, inflatable donuts and creams and ointments and all sorts of things that are supposed to make you feel better when you're trying to sit down and you can't. And that didn't work too well. I got just more and more miserable, more and more pain. Reached the point where if I forgot myself and sat down, it would hurt so much I'd pee a little. That's how much it hurt. So finally I got to the point where I went and visited the doctor about it. And naturally that was the day when it started feeling better and I could actually sit for a minute. And I was examined, and basically there's a portion here in Mr. Cheek that's inflamed, and it's obviously the source of the problem, but there's no known cause for it. We don't know exactly what it is, and you say it's getting better, so here, take these pain pills, take these antibiotics, and just go on with your life. So I did, and things went well for a while. It kind of healed up, stopped being sore, and I was doing fine until fairly recently when it got bad again. And once again, I suffered with it for a few days and finally went to the doctor. And this time when the doctor looked at it, well, let me backtrack a little. I had a couple of days pretty bad while the doctor was out of the office over the weekend, and I went to the local emergency room. And they were more concerned with me puking up yellow stuff and pooping out red stuff. They weren't real concerned about a sore near my butt. And once they got me to quit puking and pooping, they just, finally got around to looking at the sore and said, well, it's a little inflamed, but it's not doing any of that drainage you were talking about. And I know you reported that you've been running a fever, but right now your fever is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. We don't see any reason to admit you right now. Follow up with your regular doctor Monday. So that's what I did. And when I followed up with the regular doctor Monday, it just happened to be feverish, inflamed, draining. And as soon as she looked at me down there, she said, you need to be in the hospital. By the way, who's your surgeon? Which surprised me because I thought we had just some kind of little lesion or something from the cancer or from the chemotherapy. I didn't think it was anything that needed surgery. And surgery down there around your butt basically is a good way to get a bad infection. It is a good way to damage nerves so that your butt never works right again, not to get too specific. And so it's kind of scary to be asked, we'll put you in the hospital, by the way, who's your surgeon? But I specified the surgeon that did my port. You can see it's still healing up. I always get the angles wrong here. But as you can see, it's still healing up. And I've still got a little pump knot here, if you can see. So they drew some blood and sent me off to the hospital. And the surgeon came by and checked me and basically said I had some kind of abscess or, fistula was the main problem. But up inside my butt, something got infected, maybe because of the cancer, maybe because of the chemo, maybe just because of me. And it had developed some drainage that had to drain somewhere. And since it wasn't near the surface, it made its own hole to the surface. Fistula, I think they call it. And I think a fistula is just a fancy term for any hole you got in your body that your body developed that wasn't in the original blueprints. So the fistula developed and was draining, and that was the sore, and that was the source of some of the odd things in my underwear that I wasn't sure what it came from. And basically that was the source of the inflammation. Is some kind of, he didn't know what happened. He said it's possible some stool or digestive juices, exited through a perforation in the bowel and set up housekeeping in my buttocks. Possibly just some kind of infection I had. Nobody knows. And it's not very common. It's not uncommon, but it's not very common, that happens. It's something that happens every day and something that a doctor would look for. So I guess I can't too badly blame the people that I'd gone to in the past about this, for not figuring out what it was. But basically it was an abscess, which reminds me of a joke. A man went to the doctor and said every time he farted, it sounded funny. And so the doctor said, well, that doesn't sound very serious. I mean, why do you want it? Well, it's real concerning to me, doctor. Okay. All right, well, lower your pants. Let's see what you got here. And just as he was lowering his pants, he let out a fart, and it sounded like Honda. And the doctor said, that sounded very strange. You're right, sir. Maybe you need to be concerned. Can you pass gas again? So let me try it. He kind of shifts around, and he goes, Honda. And he says, well, let me check you out here. So he bends him over, he digs around for a while and says, here's the problem. You've got an abscess on your butt. Well, what does that have to do with my farts making that noise? Says, everybody knows that abscess makes the fart go Honda. Okay, I think that's clever. Anyway, but it turns out I had an abscess on my butt, and so the doctor, or the surgeon, examined me, ordered some sitz baths where you just sit in warm water for a while, and basically said, we're going to have to monitor this for a day or two and see if it gets better. Your abscesses are draining, but the problem is that this is a hole that isn't in the plans. So as soon as the abscess stops draining, it's going to start healing up. And if it heals up from the outside in, then you can still end up with infection and drainage and whatnot inside that just has to force another hole. And we think that's what happened. I was previously, a few weeks back when I went to the doctor and I was feeling better, it's because it had drained. It started healing up. They gave me some antibiotics and some ointments and whatnot. And so, but then later when the abscess developed some more and had some more drainage, they had to force a hole again. And that's where all my pain and discomfort was coming from this time. So the theory was, put him on some high-power antibiotics. I had an IV pole just full of antibiotics. Put him on some high-power antibiotics for a day or two, let it drain, see how he heals up. And so that was the first couple of days in the hospital, was me suffering from the inflammation. Things really didn't feel good down there at all, and being hooked up to an IV pole just full of antibiotics. And there was one that was like every day and one that was every 12 hours. I think one they swapped out every 6 hours. But it just seemed like every time I rolled over and tried to get to sleep, the IV pump would beep and it was time for them to come in and hang more antibiotics. So after a couple of days of saying you're looking better, but it's not good enough, we need to cut you. We need to take you into surgery. We need to find out where this fistula is, this unnatural hole, and we need to track it back to where the abscess is and make sure that we open it up, just split you open, and make sure everything is cleaned out, all the infection's gone, whatever's causing the problem is gone, all washed out. And then we're going to pack you full of gauze and let you heal from the inside out and be good again. And then it'll stop hurting. And the stop hurting thing's what sold me, because I'm, really don't care to be under the knife. But he made it sound like instant relief, basically, because the opening up of the skin would allow all the pressure and abscess and drainage and whatever to get out. So I went in for surgery after I'd been in the hospital about 3 days. And when I woke up, I did feel a whole lot better. In fact, when I woke up, I was laying on my back with pressure on my butt, and I wasn't screaming. So that's the thing. And they gave me a little, we're going to say this, a little pain pump where you go and give yourself a little shot of pain medicine, which I didn't really need, because if you got a 0 to 10 scale on how bad the pain was, and it was like a 9, that was before surgery. After surgery, you could just take the whole pain scale and squeeze it down, or expand it, or whatever, because it was a whole, like, the pain was that was there was a whole order of magnitude less than the pain before the surgery. I didn't realize how bad I was hurting until after the surgery, when I felt that sense of relief. And I hit the pain button a few times because they told me any little twinge, any little slight hint of pain, hit the pain button, because you don't want the pain to get to the point where you're actually hurting. The whole point of the pain pump is to keep you from hurting. So I did hit the pain pump quite a bit the first couple of days, and then I kind of weaned myself off of it, because I really, compared to what I was beforehand, this was a minor irritation. It wasn't really a pain, and there wasn't that much point to hitting the pain pump. Little Diet Coke here from a local restaurant. I went out to eat today with the family. The other thing about the pain medicine I didn't like was it caused me to forget things and to see things that weren't there and just generally feel fuzzy. I still feel mentally fuzzy. And in fact, I remember today that I went out to eat. My brother tells me I went out to eat with the family at a local restaurant yesterday. I have no memory of that, honestly. As far as I'm concerned, the last 2 or 3 weeks are compressed down to 2 or 3 days worth of memories, and big parts of it I've missed. And I blame that on the pain medicine or maybe the nausea medicine. So after the surgery, I felt much better, was hitting the pain pump a little, and according to my family, I was having conversations with people that weren't there. And I remember a little of that myself. I can be talking to somebody, look over to my brother to get his opinion on something or have him confirm something, and see him sitting there looking at me like, because I was talking to somebody that wasn't there. And then when I turned back to, say, why is my brother acting so funny? Well, that person would be gone. And it actually, I think it was I was asleep. It's real hard to get a good night's sleep in a hospital. And so I think pretty much every time I closed my eyes, I'd drift off to sleep. And because my mind was so concerned about being in the hospital and my friends and family visiting me and whatnot, that I would just, as soon as I closed my eyes, I would imagine somebody was there talking with me. And it wouldn't be until I opened my eyes or turned to talk to my brother that I'd realize that I was dreaming it or imagining it or something. Toward the end, I realized it was almost a Matrix thing going on, where the background in the room would be kind of greenish, and then I'd like blink and the person would be gone, and the green in the room would be kind of bluish, because it was kind of a blue. We had a big window, and I keep it open all the time just to see the blue skies above me. So I think that had something to do with it. It was just crazy. And I'm very weak today. It was about all I could do to set up the green screen. I hope I remember to put some backgrounds back there. But being in the hospital for a week and a day, or week and 2 days, however long it was, when I got out, I felt weaker than I've ever felt in recent memory. I mean, I'm sure when I was a baby I was weaker than this, but the chemotherapy leaves me weak and leaves me tired, but I can still go up and down the steps. I can still make my own food, whatnot. After a week in the hospital, it was all I could do to walk. They got me up like the day or two before I was discharged and made me walk the halls of the hospital, and it was about all I could do, hanging on to that IV pole to walk. And now that I'm home, it's up and down the steps is about the limit of my endurance. It's very, very tiring, very, very weary, however you say that, being in the hospital. And I know even, with the chemo and whatnot, or just feeling bad, I've spent days in bed here at the house, but it didn't tire me out the way that spending day in bed at the hospital did. And I know part of that is they were always coming in to change my IVs, always coming in to check my lab work, always coming in to get a blood pressure. And there was no time when I could just lay down for several hours and just sleep. Plus, it's hard to sleep in a strange place, or at least it is for me. I would have slept better in a generic hotel room somewhere than I slept in the hospital. And a lot of people came to visit me, and that really touched me. Because generally at the hospital, I've given them the idea that I'm antisocial, and that if I was in the hospital, I wouldn't want them to visit me, just because I had thought I wouldn't want to be disturbed. I had thought I wouldn't want people bothering me, but it turns out I was completely wrong about that. And this is like the first time since I was a child that I'd spent any time in a hospital. I've had surgeries, but it's in and out the same day. But after spending a week in the hospital, if everybody that worked at that hospital had come and visit me, it would not have bothered me. I really appreciate the people that did take the time to come visit. And if in the past I'd told you something like, I don't want you visiting me at the hospital, I retract that. But after several days of healing after the surgery, the doctor finally came in. Every day he'd come in and poke at me and say I look better. They removed the gauze that they'd stuffed up in the incisions to try to encourage me to heal from the inside out, as opposed to healing over and still having abscess, infection, or whatnot inside. They wanted me to heal from the outside in. And sent me home, and of course I immediately hit the bed. But I'm still draining a bit, but there's no pain, there's no inflammation, and I feel better. I'm still pretty weak. Family says I've stopped talking to people that aren't there, so I'll take the word for it. But the family also said that I like went out to eat with them yesterday, and I don't remember that. And there was supposed to be some family coming from out of town visiting, so and possibly some other things. I've got some messages on Facebook that I don't remember sending. But basically, somehow I got all my schedule messed up yesterday, and then some family that had driven 8.5 hours didn't get to see me because I was not at the house, and then by the time they caught up with me, I was give out and I had to lay down, and so I'm really sorry about that. And if you've been emailing me or text messaging me and whatnot, I am trying to read everything. I am trying to get back to you on everything, but just this being in the hospital and this 3 weeks that in my mind is like 3 days, it's just really just kind of messed me up mentally, and I'm still recovering. But I am feeling better. I am feeling stronger. I've been able to walk a bit more the last couple of days, and I'm feeling more clear-headed, at least enough to post a video. What I've not been able to do is get up the gumption to shave. I think you can see that I'm kind of old Mr. White McNeckbeard here, and on the one hand, I've been clean shaven for years, and I want to maintain that because in my mind, cleanliness, it means clean shavenness. Plus, when you've got a beard, you have to we'll trim it down here, we'll trim it up here, we'll make it a nice, evenly defined whatever, and my beard doesn't really grow evenly. But I've not had a beard in a long time, so it's kind of getting long enough to be shaggy and long enough that I'm just wondering if it's time to take it off or not. But anyway, I'm feeling better, a little more upbeat. The doctor is going to see me later this week and make sure that I've healed sufficiently, and then I'll be talking to my chemo doctor about resuming the chemotherapy, which will, of course, whatever energy I have, that's going to sap it right out of me again. But that's supposedly what's keeping me alive is the chemotherapy, and supposedly has been decreasing the. We've only had one CT since, well, actually we've had several CTs, but the doctor's only got the results of one. That since the chemo started, we've had an extra CT done of my lungs, and it's shown fewer, smaller, less dense lesions and no evidence of new lesions. And I recently had at the emergency room, I had a CT of my abdomen and pelvis. And I'm hoping that once the information gets back to the doctor, that they'll say the same thing: smaller lesions, fewer lesions, no new lesions, which means the chemotherapy is doing something. Because if I was doing all this chemotherapy and not getting any results, then I would be very, very upset. So that's where we are now. I was in the hospital with an anal abscess. I am back home. I am feeling better. It's going to take a while, but hopefully I'll be back to full strength and ready to start the chemo here in the next week or so. Okay, this is Uncle Troy signing out. Please have a good night.